episode of Stoke Meter. We have David Beers with us. David, how the heck are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. I'm excited to be here today.
It is absolutely great to have you here. And I couldn't thank you enough because I know that you are a busy man. And I got to tell the audience why. This man has his hands on so many things. It's amazing. He is the CEO of Biolexis, as well as Biolexis Therapeutics. He's also founded a number of different companies, one of which he was the former CEO and founder of cellular Pharmaceuticals, and it goes on and on and on. And one thing that is amazing about David is that he uses science to solve some incredible problems, and he is busy finding different solutions. And I'm not going to go into all of that because it's so scientific, and I don't have that big time scientific background, but the impact that David has had has been amazing. And one of the things that he uses is our computational approaches to modeling protein small molecule interactions as a means of discovering new potential drug candidates. Now, no, I didn't memorize that. I actually just read that. So David, without further ado, again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Well,
so it's been an amazing ride for me over my career, and to watch how drug discovery has changed. I trained with a guy who's a very famous clinical researcher, a guy named Daniel von Hoff. So Dr. von Hoff is he's run almost 500 phase 1 clinical trials in his career. So he's been the doctor that when companies and with people have gotten drugs ready to go into the clinic for the first time, he's the doctor that gives the drug to the patient for the first time. So he's kind of been an institution for the last 40, almost 50 years of doing clinical research. And I had the great opportunity as a young scientist to work with him. I was a postdoctoral fellow with him. And while I worked with him, I probably saw 100 new drugs enter the clinic and get early clinical data. And I have to say that there's nothing like being in the trenches with watching these data come out in real time and learning from the good things and bad things that happen as these programs move forward. And so for me, it's just been amazing to watch how things have changed over my career, and what we can do now that we could only just dream of 25 years ago. And it just seems that the pace and the scale of what we can do now is so different than it was even just a few years ago. And so super excited about having a conversation with you, just talking about how do we discover new drugs to take into people. And for me, I'm motivated every day. I get up every morning thinking today's the day we might get that data that says we found something that could change the world. And I think if I have to work every day, that's not a bad thing to wake up and do, right? So to me, I think about it every day as can I make a discovery today that's going to really change the impact of millions of people. And the amazing thing is that's possible, right? That we can actually do that. And when we look back at drugs that changed the world, well, just recently, just the what happened during COVID and how the drug discovery accelerated very fast. We got vaccines, we got other drugs that could help with a major global pandemic, and just to see how quickly those things happen, it's just truly remarkable. So yeah, I'd love to chat with you about how that's all come about, and what we're doing now that's different than what we did in the past, and how we're trying to be leaders in changing the way we discover and develop drugs.
Yeah, well, one of the first questions I've got to get down to is the time that I've known you, you have literally started or had your hands in a number of different companies and a number of different pharmaceuticals, and it seems like it gets faster and faster and faster. And I know technology is one of the contributors to that acceleration in finding those solutions. But what other things would you attribute it to? And even more so, what have you learned in the process, and what knowledge have you disseminated to the people that you work with? Because now it's a big company, so it goes from inception to boom. So how does that go about?
Yeah, it's been it's been fun to be involved in I love building things and growing things, and being involved with a conception of an idea to say, what if we could do this, and then to actually do it and build a company around it. It's it's amazing. Sometimes I take a step back and look and just think, holy cow, we built this. We created this from nothing, from an idea. So yeah, it's in the pace, as you mentioned. I think that we can do things now that just a few years ago we weren't able to do. So maybe I can give you just a little bit of history of where I started,
Yes.
and how we've kind of the timeline of things. So it's funny, when I worked with Dr. Von Hoff, I watched him, be able to work with a lot of companies. Every company in the world will come and present to us, and we'd have the Pfizers and the Mercks and the big companies, and then even the tiny little biotech companies would come in. And I remember a lot of companies that were like 5 people. The whole company came in and presented to us, and then a couple of years later, this company turned into something big. They had a success, and their idea worked out. And so that got me interested in the idea that I could create something that could turn into something that could be a driver for good and change in the world. And so we worked a lot in our group when I was a professor in trying to come up with new ways to discover drugs. And when you're a small team, you have to think about, how can we compete? When Pfizer has 250,000 employees, they've got tens of thousands of scientists working on the same problem as you, and you've got 10 people in your team. How can you compete with that? And so you have to find ways to leverage the strengths that you have. And I think one of the things that we become good at over the years is having biological insight into diseases that is really, there's no good way to develop that other than just by experience. So the only way to do it is just doing it, many times, and trying different ideas and different things, and seeing what works and doesn't work. And so over the years, I've gotten better and better at having just a sense of intuition of what's a good targeting strategy or good pathway from the biology side. But then we also have to figure out, how do we bridge that to become something that's actually a real therapeutic that can help real people. And so what's the right disease to look at, what's the what's the targeting strategy that we go through. And so we, as a small little group, we have to, I always tell people that necessity is the mother of invention, right? That when you have to do something, that's when you come up with innovative ideas. And I think that's why small companies and small groups can compete with larger ones, because I don't think there's that same sense of urgency and necessity in Pfizer than there is at a tiny little company, because those guys are going to get their paycheck whether it works or doesn't work, whether what they're working on works or doesn't. But the people I work with, they live and die by whether we're successful. And so it's a different level, I think, of urgency and necessity, and that drives innovation, right? Because we have to come up with ways to solve problems that other groups are going to just brute force their way through, right? If I had infinite funding, I could brute force my way through a lot of things. But if I don't have that, which I've really never had, I'm always trying to make the most out of the little amount of funding I have. We try to come up with clever ways to get to solutions that is different than what exists currently. And so when we were first starting out with the idea that we could actually be competitive in finding new drugs, we thought, and this was back in the late 1990s, we thought well, what if we could use computational approaches? And back then, that was kind of an unheard of thing that
Right.
computational approaches in biology and chemistry were kind of they were used for confirmatory. So once you've already discovered something, and once you've already kind of worked it out, you use computational stuff to kind of confirm that what you already know is true. And so people were just starting to adopt those tools as a way to confirm something they already have discovered. But we wanted to say, well, what if we could actually use these same tools to actually discover new things? And it's funny because, we went out and started, and my good friend and partner, I think one of the other things I've learned is you got to have good people that you work with. So
Yes.
Hari Prasad, Ben Kalapati, Hari, we just call him Hari because his name's hard to pronounce, but Hari and I have been partners for a long time. And, we're kind of, we think of ourselves as like musicians. I write the words and he puts the music to those, those lyrics. And so we found a match where we've got somebody on the biology side, which is me, and somebody on the chemistry side, which is Hari, that we sit down together and we work closely to figure out how to solve some of these questions and problems. But Hari was a very willing partner to jump in and say, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can use these computational tools to actually discover drugs, as opposed to just kind of confirm that they do what we think they do. So we were one of the first groups to really, on a large scale, to start to use computational techniques. And people ask me all the time, well, how did you figure all that out? It's like, well, we had to, right? we to be competitive. When there's only 5 of us working on a project, and we're working on the same project as a big company that has, thousands of people to throw at that same project, the only way we can be competitive is be innovative. And so what we did is we figured out how to model biology in unique ways. And so back then it's funny because it seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
I mean, it was just a few years ago. We were really bad as a field, just bad at knowing, how drugs interacted with proteins, and that's something that's kind of the premise of what all drugs. And I shouldn't say all, because as a scientist, whenever you say all, you're wrong, because there's always exceptions. But I should say most drugs work by binding to proteins, and proteins are the workhorses inside of our body. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're actually looking at a bunch of different proteins that have been put together. And so our body functions because of the proteins that we express. And so when things go wrong in a disease, it's those proteins that actually they don't function properly, and that's what leads to things like cancer and Alzheimer's and every disease that you can think of. So when we design drugs, we try to either restore the function of a protein that's been lost, and that's very hard to do, or we inhibit the function of a protein that's kind of lost its regulation. And that's what most drugs do, is they inhibit the function of a dysfunctional protein. And so we came up with some ways to model that, and to make predictions based off of those models. And that's really what our process has always been, is model something, make predictions, and then test those predictions. And if they work, then we accept the model. If they don't work, then we go back and fix the model so that we can make better predictions. And that sounds really simple, but it was really, really hard to build that.
I can only imagine. I mean, that's scientific inquiry, right? It's going through that process.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And what I love is how you've accelerated that process so that the assumption is no longer assumption, as long as it typically is. And to your point, that's exactly why you've been able to identify so many solutions to these problems that are out there. But oh my goodness, no, keep going, David. I just had to interject. It's so cool to hear it from this point of view, because first of all, I didn't know a whole lot about proteins. I knew of their their importance and so on, especially all these workout guys, protein, but you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
realize what the things are that it really puts together. I mean, my father died of multiple myeloma, and
Yeah.
and
Yep.
yeah, you think about those things and going back to there. I don't think I ever remember hearing protein associated with that back, and this was back in the early 90s, right? So
Yep.
just I wish you were there when I was going through that. But anyway,
Yeah,
carry
well,
on. Sorry for
it
that interruption.
no, 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 that's great. And you know, you know, my own mother, you know, she passed away of cancer, of colon cancer, and my grandfather passed away of colon cancer at a very young age. And so I've always been motivated. And really, you know, when I look at myself and say, why do I do this? You know, why do I put myself through all this? Well, you know, at the end of the day, I want other people's moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas to be around a little longer. And, you know, you know, I know you probably feel the same way.
Yeah.
I would trade a whole lot, everything I have to have more time with my mom. I mean, and that's really what I'm trying to provide. And so, you know, that's the driving force behind what we do. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's interesting as we break down, you know, why do we get sick and what causes these diseases? And it's just dysregulation. Our bodies are so complex how they function, and it's remarkable. It's a real miracle that they, you know, that we stay alive as long as we do, because
Yes.
it's just amazing how much has to happen and how many things have to go right in order for our bodies to function. And you know, it makes sense as you understand how complicated that machinery is, that sometimes, I mean, we're all familiar, our cars break down and they're very simple compared to what our bodies are. And so our bodies break down, and our bodies have an amazing ability to heal themselves and to fix things. But sometimes, you know, things get away from us and we can't fix them. And so, you know, that's where modern medicine is let's figure out how to intervene in a way that allows either the body to heal itself, or try to get rid of the things, the cells that have become dysregulated, those proteins that have become you know, dysregulated in a way that they're causing disease. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And so, you know, we've gotten better and better over time, and you know, we're to the point now where we're challenging ourselves with some of the hardest problems that are out there, and saying, okay, you know, we've shown that this technique and this approach works for things that are kind of validated, to say, you know, so just to dig one level deeper here, and I don't want to turn this into too much of a biology
Oh,
lecture,
please
but
do.
but most of the proteins that we actually target with drugs are enzymes. So enzymes are proteins that will catalyze chemical reactions inside our body. So, like for example, we use enzymes to digest our food. So when we eat food, that food is full of nutrients that we break down. So they're complex when we eat them, and then we break them down into basic building blocks. And we do that through enzymes. So we have enzymes that we produce inside of our body that will go and chew up the food that we ingest, and we'll break it down into basic building blocks, and then we use those building blocks to support ourselves. And so most drugs target enzymes, and so we have drugs that will target enzymes that catalyze, you know, all kinds of things. In cancer, we focus a lot on enzymes that drive cell growth, because we know that cancer, you know, cancer is a disease that it is associated with uncontrolled proliferation of cells. The cells just keep growing. They lose their normal regulatory mechanisms. And so we try to target enzymes that will limit cell growth. And so we've been successful with a lot of drugs that do that. And so, you know, we started with well-validated enzymes that we said, okay, we know that if we inhibit that, and we kind of have an idea of how to inhibit it, because the cool thing about enzymes is they have a business side. You know, there's a place where we know that where the actual activity resides, and we just try to stick things in there to stop the function of that enzyme. And that's how we, you know, that's how the drug targeting strategy works. Well, now we're challenging ourselves to say, can we target things that aren't enzymes? So other proteins that get messed up that actually don't have an enzymatic function. And that's been a real challenge. I mean, that's been kind of one of the holy grails that we've been looking at, saying if we could do that. And so we're to the point now where, you know, we feel like we've got a reasonable chance of finding, you know, lead therapeutic compounds that can actually target almost every protein structure that you can come up with. And there's been a lot of breakthroughs that have happened just in the past 3 or 4 years that have enabled that. And so, you know, I don't know, you probably haven't heard this, but you know, because this is big in my world, but it's not widely, you know, understood. But you know, it's funny, you know, we hear all the time about how artificial intelligence is changing everything, right?
Yes.
These AI algorithms that are out there, and chat GTP and all these things that people are excited about. Well, we have the same thing going on right now at the same time in our world. And in fact, some of the same players like Google and Facebook and, you know, these companies, they're working on AI algorithms for all kinds of things. So Google had a group that they use an algorithm called DeepMind. And so they have an artificial machine learning algorithm that tries to, they throw all kinds of problems at it and see if it can figure them out. And so one of the things that Google did was they trained their artificial intelligence to try to learn how proteins fold. So when a protein is made, it's made as a linear sequence of amino acids. So amino acids are put together to build a protein chain. And then that, in order to be a functional protein, it has to fold up into a three-dimensional structure. And that's what a functional protein looks like. Well, one of the big challenges for us using computational techniques is we don't know how all those proteins fold up. We had a hard time. We could read the amino acid sequence, but we didn't know what the three-dimensional structure looked like. And so Google actually 2 years ago, I guess just over 2 years ago, they solved that problem. So they developed a algorithm that could reproducibly accurately predict the structure of proteins based off of amino acid sequence. And it's not perfect, but it's really, really good at getting a starting point. So now, you know, where we, you know, literally 10 years ago, we had just a few hundred or 1,000 of these three-dimensional structures that we could rely on. And now we have every one of them. We have everything. So we can, it's amazing. And so it's because of these artificial intelligence algorithms, and they're just getting better and better all the time. So the one that Google made was called AlphaFold, and they've actually made some improvements to it. And there's a bunch of other ones out there now that have kind of done the same thing. So the tools that we have available because of artificial intelligence has just revolutionized what we can do. You know, in the old days, we were limited to, you know, things that we had pretty deep knowledge, you know, a limited number of proteins that we had a lot of information about. And now we can, anything we can dream of, we can basically go and test. We can say, well, what if we could do that? And we're not limited by the idea that we need all of this really hard to get structural information, because we can use these algorithms to just fold up these proteins and say, what do they look like? And how can we design a drug? So we're getting to the point now where, you know, we feel like, you know, we're on just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do in terms of finding new drugs, and not just drugs. You know, one of the exciting things is the approaches that we've used to discover drugs to treat human diseases. Those same approaches will work for every living thing in the on the planet.
Goodness.
And so we haven't used them because they're too expensive. You know, so we haven't used them for plants and for fish and for pets and livestock because it's too expensive. But if we can make it cheaper and faster, then maybe we can start using these same tools to look for things that could actually increase the growth of plants and new pesticides that target insects, and take these technologies and apply them in areas that we haven't been able to because they're cost prohibitive,
Yeah.
but it could open up a whole new world. So we're excited about all the possibilities of things that we could do. And even, I mean, every day we come up with a new idea to say, well, what if we could do this? And and the cool thing is now we can at least test that idea and say, well,
Right.
give it a try, because we can test a lot of this stuff very quickly. And I mean, I go to Hari almost on a weekly basis and come in and say, hey, give this one a try, and literally the next week you'll have someone say, look what look at this, and I actually found something. So it's like the most exciting time in my career, and I just see it just exploding, the types of things that we can do.
Well, what blows my mind is I look back when I went to school in the 80s, man. And I remember they had that protein model where you took stuff and that's all I knew of what that looked like.
Yeah.
And now I look back in the 80s and then you fast forward to now, and that's just a little that was science fiction back then, and now that it's happening, it's blowing my mind, right? And the other thing too is looking at your background. I mean, you've been everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Your scientific background is there's very few people that can match that. But hearing you now and hearing the excitement and the possibility and where this is going right now is absolutely mind-blowing, because I can tell you're excited about it and it keeps you going. And there was, matter of fact, that one of our other guests said that the key to his success as a company was the ability to continually solve problems. And that's exactly what you folks do on a day-to-day basis. And it is going faster and faster and faster. How do you focus that? I mean, there's so many tangents that you could go off of. How in the world do you focus and then move on? It's easier said than done, no doubt about that.
It is. Yeah, no, it is. And it's one of the things that I think I've learned over the years, because I've not always been good at this, but being able to prioritize and say, we can do 1,000 things, but let's do this one. Let's and I think one of the things that we've tried to do is to break things down into steps. And so we know that even as good as we've gotten at this, we still have a lot of projects that fail, and they fail for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I've always dealt with failure is, we learn from everything that every project we learn from, whether it works or doesn't work, we learn something. And so we try to incorporate that to get better and better every time. But the other thing is, we do play a bit of the numbers game and say, if I have to start 10 projects to get one that works, then I better start 10 projects, right? So we do try to prioritize and say, and so we are constantly multitasking. And one of the things, it's funny, I get people that come and visit and look at what we're doing and say, wow, how are you doing so many things? And I'm like, well, in science is not a linear thing. We don't make discoveries like this. We make them like this, right? There are times where everything works and it's great, and then nothing works, and then everything works, and so there's these ups and downs. And the way that I've dealt with that, because that's a horrible roller coaster to ride, right? If you're really up one day and really down, I mean, your life is gonna be crazy. So the way that we mitigate that is we have everybody work on multiple things, and so then the average of that looks like this. So you got the ups and downs of every program, but as long as you're going like this, then everybody's happy, right? So we try to make sure that we kind of take an opposite approach to a lot of people. So a lot of companies and a lot of scientists will try to be 1,000 feet deep, but a diameter of a few inches, but they know that area really, really well. And we try to be experts, but we try to be experts stretch across a lot of different areas. And so the people that I work with tend to become very their ability to multitask is that's one of the things they have to do to survive working with us. But they become very broad-based people. They have a broad expertise in lots of different areas, and to me, that's another way to keep people creatively engaged in what they're doing, is you're constantly giving them new challenges every day, and it does, I mean, we may not be, the classic scientist that's 1,000 feet deep and 1 inch around, but we could be 50 feet deep and 50 feet wide,
Yeah.
right? So we have a lot more to draw from, and I think that what I've learned is that biology repeats itself. So things that seem very different can actually have a lot of similarities to each other, and so we can actually work on pretty diverse problems and realize that there are commonalities. That's like, oh, wait a minute, that looks a lot like this, and so one of the things that I think we've found that's beneficial is doing multiple things at one time. You can kind of, they're not so different from each other that that you have to compartmentalize all this information. You can actually look at it as a continuum and apply things from one, you learn something over here that's going to help you over here. So
Yeah.
It's a constant battle to stay focused, and we focus, but we focus on multiple things. So we don't ever have just a single project. And I mean, I feel like I'm not a I've gone through so many risky things that I'm not scared of much anymore. Like nothing scares me. But one thing that does scare me is having all my eggs in one basket, right? I just think that we still don't know enough about human biology to place all our bets to say this is going to work for sure. And so we always try to create we try to mitigate risk by having multiple things that we're working on. I think for me, it's the only way I can stay sane, right? It's that I don't have to have something, that this one project is going to save us, that because the chance of that happening, unfortunately, is you still are playing a probability game that isn't in your favor a lot of times.
Well, while you've been talking about that, two things came to mind. One has to be with traditional organizational development, and the other one has to be with a movie. You ever seen Ready Player One?
Yes. Yeah.
Your companies remind me of Ready Player One. You go against all the big guys, but because you have that broad expertise in the game, you understand how to go. And that leads me to the next thing in organizational development. I've worked in a couple tech firms, and to your point, when salesmen go out, they are sales. Boom, they are right in that tunnel. And then the engineers, on the other hand, they are deep into the possibilities of what we can create, and they'll get in that. And rarely did they communicate, and hence so many of the problems came about. And what I'm seeing there, and talking with you and David and some others there, you folks have to know everything, at least in a little bit, so that you know how you're impacting each other and approaching that market. And I'm just wondering, man, are you creating a new business model too?
Yeah, and it's what is still a challenge is how do you scale what you do when you have a small innovative company that kind of has this culture of like I talked about, we're driven by, we have to invent, we have to innovate because we can't survive if we don't. But as we get bigger and more successful, how do you maintain that, right? How is because it's just the tendency, as soon as people feel like that urgency is gone, then it changes the way that people interact in their culture. And so we've been trying to figure out, we love that, there's this intensity that comes from the urgency that if we can't solve this problem, we're all in big trouble. And but once you solve it and you've had some success, how do you keep that, so that you and it's really hard to fake, right? You can't, people know that when something's really urgent and when you're trying to make it urgent. And so I think we've tried to create these challenges that we're constantly we're fighting biology, we're fighting cancer, right? That's
Yes.
our big challenge that's out there. And the good thing about staying focused out there is that become, I mean, that's still far in the distant, right? So I mean, we think that we're making progress, and we're making huge progress, but it's still, we're not to the point where, you know, everybody comes in and we have a treatment for everybody that's going to be effective. And so I think, you know, what we've tried to do is to keep people focused on the big problem, the big, you know, one thing that I learned from Von Hoff when I trained with him, he told me the very first day, he said, cancer never sleeps, and neither should you. Because he says, if you want to beat cancer, cancer's working 24/7. And if you take time off, the cancer's still working, you know, that's the sense of urgency that I got. And so I've tried to keep that so everyone feels like, you know, if we stop working, people are going to die. And so the bottom line is that's true. It's not, there's not a, you don't have, that's not made up, that's real. So I think, you know, for us, we're trying to hang on to that culture and make people feel they're working on something that's really big, and we're trying to solve big problems. But you know, we break it up enough that we can have successes, you know, incremental successes along the way, and we can celebrate those. But the general urgency to say there's still, you know, hundreds of thousands of people dying every year of these diseases that we're working on. So that keeps you motivated and keeps you focused. So yeah, it's not easy though. It's, you know, you can be a victim of your own success very easily, right? And the last thing I ever want to do is become complacent. I'm not the type of person, I'm going to go find the next challenge, right?
You are. And
go climb the
okay,
next
so
mountain.
that begs another point there. I'm looking at your background there, out over there, and what a fantastic looking family for one. So
thank you.
with everything going on, how do you maintain that balance? Because you have, I know cancer never sleeps, but man, that family is looking really good.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, and it is something that I think all of us, you know, we have to make a concerted effort to make sure that we do have some balance in our life, because it is important. I mean, these people right here are the reason why, you know, I'm working to make sure, not just financially, but to make sure that their future, you know, I mean, as I mentioned, my mom died of cancer, my grandpa died of cancer. The chance of me dying of cancer is quite high, just based off of my genetics, and I pass that on to these guys as well. And so they, you know, I think that we, you know, one of the things that I do is these guys know a lot about what I work on. So you know, I'm probably not the right person to be talking about balance, because I probably, you know, when people ask me, well, what do you do for fun? It's like, well, I model proteins and I try to find, it's like, no, that's what you do for work. It's like, no, that's what I do for fun as well. Right. So it's not like I don't have a ton of outside hobbies and things that I work on. So, you know, by default, these guys get very engaged with the things that I'm working on. But one of the things that I found that keeps my family life in balance is they feel part of what I'm doing. You know, when my youngest, you know, this grandchild right here, he can tell you what his grandpa's working on. And, you know, when he comes over and visit, you know, I make sure that he understands, you know, that this is what I do, and this is why it's important. And I'm trying to help sick people. And, you know, and I think that gives them appreciation, that when the times when I'm not there, and, you know, when I'm not around, they know it's, you know, I'm trying to do something good. And so we've developed a family culture that I think that they're excited. You know, I share with them, you know, things that we discover, and you know, I think a lot of people try to keep, you know, their work and life really separated. I'm not one of those people. I you know, what I work on is a real part of me. And you know, it's a real tribute to my wife. She's been an incredible partner through all of this. I mean, I've done crazy things. You know, the first company I started, I had to sell my house and my cars to pay for, you know, to pay payroll. So that, and we moved into an apartment with my sister with 4 little kids. and my wife never complained, not one time. She never,
what a
she just said,
saint. Oh my
she's a
goodness.
saint. Yeah, she said to me, I believe in you. I believe that you can do this. You do what you have to do and make this work. And you know, I just think there's so many people that don't have that kind of support. And I'm just blessed that you know, I've just, you know, the best thing I ever did was marry her, because I couldn't have done anything that I've done without having somebody that had my back. She's always, I mean, she never has been upset with me, because, you know, I'm just like, honey, I'm trying to cure cancer. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help
Yeah.
people, you know, and you know, and she's my partner in that. And she's not a scientist, but she's very much involved in, you know, she wants to know what's going on and what, you know, what discoveries we made and the advances. And you know, so everything that you know, she celebrates when things are great, and she commiserates when things don't go well. And but yeah, it's hard to strike that balance. But I've just been blessed to have, you know, and my kids have all been wonderful. And you know, I've got one of my sons, Ben, he works with me, and Josh and Andrew, my next two sons, they're planning on going to medical school. They're in college right now. So I think some of that's rubbed off.
That is
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, and it's so neat to see it's a family mission instead of just an
Yeah.
individual mission. That makes
Yes.
a whole big of a difference. And with all that stuff, you have so many things that you've developed. I have to ask you this, and that is, have you ever met someone that benefited from something that you've been able to create?
Yeah, you know, you know, it's one of the most rewarding things that's ever happened to me in my life is, you know, to have uh patients and doctors tell me you saved somebody's life. And you know, I remember the very first drug that I discovered that went into the clinic. There was a 26-year-old kid that had, you know, very advanced cancer, lots of metastasis in his liver, was given, you know, just weeks to live.
Wow.
And he had tried everything, all the you know, the standard therapies. And he went on our clinical trial, because you know, that's what you do when you expend all your normal options. You have to try something that's a brand new idea. And you know, they ran a news piece. This was in Texas, where we were running the clinical trial. And they brought in a film crew to talk to the doctors about new discoveries, and they highlighted this individual. And you know, and they sent me a copy before they published this, and you know, watched the video. And the kid said, you know, he's a 26-year-old guy and had a brand new little family, new child. And he just said, you know, I've been given a new lease on life. And I mean, his tumor shrunk really dramatically. And you
Wow.
know, it's you know, to have that. I mean, it was one of the most emotional things to think that guy's alive because I did this. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
shocking. And I had a doctor just a couple of years ago that, you know, we were at a big medical conference, and he came up to me and said, I just want you to know that because of you, there are hundreds of people that I've treated that are alive. And to have that, it's like, my gosh, that's, you know, I could be done right now, and that's enough, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just to help one person, you know. But you know, if I can help one people, what about helping hundreds of thousands, or you know,
Yeah.
millions of people? And that's, you know, you kind of get addicted to that, to say I could really change the world. I could really make a difference here. And that's, you know, that's what gets me, like I said, gets me up every morning. That's what I'm excited about. And yeah, I mean, it's been one of, you know, I've written lots of scientific papers and gotten grants and all these things, and none of that means anything to me more than, you know, if I can help a real person. And that's, you know, that I trade all of that for helping one person.
Oh, it's amazing. You know what I wish is that I had you as a professor, especially my science classes, because you have made it all so relatable. It's not only the process of proteins and enzymes and all that good stuff. I mean, I sometimes I did pull my hair out, but while I was there, but it's to make it something that was very relatable and seeing how it impacts others. That really drew it all in. And I want to thank you for that simplicity of explanation, because it's not easy to do. Again, I've seen all of your PhDs, masters, everything else that's there, but talking to you like this, I would never think that. Not taking any way from your intellectual prowess, but it made it simple for someone like me to understand. And that's magical. That's absolutely magical.
Oh,
And on top of that, another testament of what you're doing that has a mission. I've talked to a number of your employees in a couple of different companies, and they can't say enough about David Mears. They just can't. And I know you don't need all that pat on the back
no.
kind of thing, but the fact is that you allow them to thrive in their own way. And so here's science, but then here's the people element. Good grief, man. I say you keep it up.
All right. Well, I'll keep at it for sure.
I love it. Well, no, David, I have to thank you for your time. I know it's precious.
You bet.
And look forward to all the amazing things that you'll be doing. Yes.
Well, I hope to come back and tell you about some more exciting things in the future. So looking forward to it.